Have you ever wondered why Eve ate the apple? So what's interesting about this story is I think sometimes we don't take the time to actually process the environment that they're in, right? Like, think about this for a moment. They are in a perfect garden, the perfect garden. Like, if you think about the most perfect Japanese garden that you've ever seen in your entire life, or if there's other gardens that are really awesome too. I've only seen really great Japanese gardens, but you get the idea. So you imagine you're in the perfect garden. The food is perfect, right? Everything in this place is the most beautiful place. Like, think about this for a moment. This garden is so perfect that you can walk around butt naked in this place and be perfectly fine. Like, there's no chiggers. You know what I mean? Like, you're not like itching all over from laying in the grass. There's no, I don't know where the bugs are, but apparently whatever insects are around there are not of any type of serious concern because they're just running around in the buff and are perfectly fine. Like, this place must have been paradise. Now, not only that, but you can eat of any tree in the entire garden. That was probably one of the most interesting things about Satan's temptation. When he asked Eve, she says, yeah, we can eat of any tree, which indicates that there must have been lots of trees in this garden. It wasn't just the tree of knowledge of good and evil and then the tree of life. Like, there's lots of trees in this garden, and you can eat of all of them. So why did she decide that she had to eat of the one tree you're not supposed to eat of? Now, you could try to make the argument that, well, it's human curiosity. You know, obviously you want the one thing you can't have. But I don't actually think that's what it was. In fact, I think what the real reason is actually explained pretty explicitly in the temptation of Eve. If you look at the reasons that she cited for why she decided to eat from the tree, I think it's actually pretty clear. So basically, Satan rolls up and he says, God is lying to you. Right? You're not going to die if you eat of this tree. Now, what's interesting about this is when we observe Eve's cognitive response, like how she approaches what Satan has just told her. So initially, Satan said, well, did God actually say that you can't eat from the tree, right? And her response is to recite what she had been told. Yeah, God told us we can't eat of the tree, right? And so right now she's working from a position of reliance, right? She's relying on what she had been told. But then Satan hits her with something she's not ready for. He says, well, that's not actually true. God is lying to you. You won't actually die. And so something very interesting happens. Eve moves from a position of reliance on what God had told her into something else. And so now she starts relying on her own experiences instead of on the things that God had told her. So she reasons. She looks around and goes, well, I've eaten of other trees. Those trees didn't kill me. This tree looks like those trees. Stands to reason that it should be good for food just like all the other trees. Then it says that she observed that the tree was attractive, right? It wasn't an ugly fruit, it was an attractive fruit. She's like, well, I've seen other trees in the garden. They looked good. This tree looks good. I ate those trees and didn't die. Maybe if I eat this tree, I won't die. But the last one is the most important. It says she observed that it had the ability to make one wise. Now, what possible reason could Eve have for needing to be wise? So here's what I think happened. In that moment, I think Eve realized that she didn't have the ability to evaluate whether God was actually pulling the wool over her eyes. Like, stop and think about this for a minute. So Satan basically starts out with, asking her a question that's an easy question, and she has an answer because it's the answer that God gave her. But when he makes an accusation that she doesn't have an answer for, and then she starts having to rely on her own ability to reason, I think in that moment she started to realize that her reasoning abilities were insufficient to adequately evaluate whether God was being good to her or whether he was tricking her. And I think what's most interesting about this, just bar none, is the fact that Satan was right. Satan was right that she didn't have the ability to evaluate God for herself. And she realized that when she started having to reason for herself instead of simply rely on what God had told her. And so she was left with an impossible situation. What do you do here? Do you disobey God and eat the fruit and gain the ability to evaluate for yourself at the risk of death? Or do you not eat the fruit and go on potentially living a lie and really just kind of being foolish, right? Because you don't have the ability to evaluate for yourself, and maybe God's lying to you, and that would make you feel kind of dumb and insecure. And so, of course, we know what happened after that. Eve decided to eat the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and she gained the ability to judge for herself, to determine the difference between good and evil separately from the revelation of God. And we've been living that out ever since. You see, everything that happened after the Garden of Eden, it became a life of testing. Everything in our life now has to be a test. Like, God comes along and says, hey, you should not have sex outside of a marriage, because within a marriage it's protected, and there's a multitude of reasons that that this is beneficial emotionally, psychologically, culturally, right? So much data that we could lay out that says that this really is the best way to do this. But we, on the other hand, because we ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, we feel the need to adjudicate for ourselves. We have to judge for ourselves separately from the revelation of God. And so we go and we test it for ourselves. But that process of testing, in most cases, just brings death into our life. It brings all kinds of chaos. People go out and say, okay, I'm just going to sleep around and not follow the way that God laid this thing out. And they end up with broken hearts, emotional damage. They end up with unwanted pregnancies, with STDs. All kinds of chaos is brought into their lives simply because they felt the need to test instead of just to listen. I think probably one of the greatest consequences of Adam and Eve's sin wasn't just sin entering into the world. It was the reformatting of how we engage this world, transitioning from hearing from the Creator who made everything, knows how everything works, and is willing to share with us through revelation how to get the very best outcome out of everything that there is in this life, because He's the one that made it. Instead of relying on revelation from Him, we feel like we have to go out and test everything ourselves, and we test it at our own expense. And the really ironic thing is that our tendency is actually still the same as Eve's. You see, when we go and we read the Word and it says this is how we should do things, instead of going and testing what we read in the Word by going, okay, I'm going to follow what this book says and see what types of benefits I derive. Instead, we go, oh, I'm not going to, I'm not going to live by this oppressive regime, this man-made thing. I'm going to go put all these other different ways of living to the test, right? I'm going to go sleep around and do drugs and drink and take advantage of life and everything else. I'm going to put all of that to the test and see if that brings me happiness. And we have to go out and go through all the pain of putting to the test all of the natural things before we get the clue and go, you know what? Maybe we should test the things that God said. Maybe we should do this the other way around. Maybe it'd be smarter to test the Creator's method instead of the method that we came up with in all of our 20, 30, or 40 years worth of wisdom, right? Maybe it would be smarter to test what the Creator said first instead of doing it the other way around. But it's built into us that this was the sin of Adam and Eve. And that one moment of transitioning from reliance on revelation from the one who made all of this to reliance on testing and evaluating for ourselves, that simple shift has been rewritten into our DNA. And that is our most base tendency. And that's the thing that we have to fight against. I could talk so much more on this topic because there's so many things this affects, but I am out of time, and also I know TikTok is coming to an end. So if you like this content, do me a favor, DM me or shoot me an email. I'll put my email in the comments, and I'll let you know what platform I'm moving to after this thing shuts down. See y'all next time.